Hello, everyone, and happy Thursday. I hope everyone's having a great summer so far. Hopefully, you're staying cool if you're in a hot area like I am in Jersey. Sounds like some of us are feeling the heat, some of us are in that cooler weather now. But welcome, everyone. My name is Liana, and I am the community manager here at Ceros. Joined with me, I have Elizabeth, our senior client strategist, who is going to lead our webinar today all about how you can use Ceros experiences across your entire customer journey. So we're very excited to dive in. So if anyone has any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to share them in our Q&A box at the bottom bar, and we'll make sure to answer them at the end. With that, I will hand it over to Elizabeth to get started.
Amazing. Excuse me. Hi, everyone. Let me go ahead and share my screen really quick. Perfect. Can everyone see my screen? Awesome. Thanks, Liana. All right. So, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm really excited to be here with you all today. And as Liana mentioned, we're going to be talking about something that I know a lot of us are thinking about and discussing with our teams, and that's how to get more value from the content we're already creating and how to use Ceros in a more scalable and smarter way. So, whether you're brand new to Ceros or you've been creating and publishing for a while, today's goal is to really help you think more holistically and strategically to find opportunities to scale without a ton of extra work, which I know we can all appreciate. All right, so before we jump into the content, I'll do a little intro for myself. So, my name is Elizabeth Slim. I'm a senior client strategist here on the strategy team, and I've been at Ceros for about 10 years now. So, I have a lot of experience in strategy, design, UX, and UI, and that has really helped me allowed me, sorry, to help a wide range of clients evolve their content strategies, unlock new use cases, and in general, just gain more value from the platform. So I will be your guide. It's possible that my cat Gerald might join us as well. And then at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. All right, let's move on. So what are we going to be covering today? So we're going to start with why full funnel content matters. Then we'll move into how Saros can support content at every stage of the journey. And then after that, we'll shift into actually planning and activating this within your team. So planning your strategy. And of course, as mentioned, we'll also be going through some Q&A. All right, so let's move to why full funnel content matters. Okay, so first we have it aligns content with customer intent. So we know every stage of the funnel represents a different mindset, and there are different questions that are happening at each stage. And for this, we're meeting people where they are. So at the awareness stage, your audience is, of course, just discovering you. They're asking a lot of different questions. What is this? Who are you? Do you understand my needs? And so our main goal here is to spark curiosity and build relevance. And as they move into, consideration and decisions, those questions obviously shift. So, why should I trust you? Or what makes you different from other people in this space? And why are they going to value choosing you over someone else? So, when your content is designed with those evolving questions in mind, it definitely feels more intentional, more personal, and ultimately more effective. So you're guiding people through the journey with clarity and purpose, and that's what really builds real connection and conversion. Okay, moving on to the next one. We have it maximizes the ROI of every interaction. So, as mentioned, when your content strategy spans the full funnel, you're absolutely building momentum. Momentum, excuse me. A single idea or an asset can do so much more for you when you design it to evolve across the different stages. For example, a piece that starts maybe as an awareness campaign could become a product explainer in the consideration stage, and then maybe adapt it into something for post sale. So you're stretching your creative investment and creating more of a connected experience for your audience. Oops, there we go. Apologies, something looks like it's not working here. Sorry about that. I will fix that. Next, we have it makes the most of your Ceros investment. So we see this. I'm so sorry about that. We see this all the time. Sometimes teams come to us and they start using Ceros for maybe one specific use case or one campaign, maybe like a landing page or a one-off interactive quiz. And that's a great entry point. We love to see it. But if that's where your usage ends, we know that you're leaving a lot of value on the table. So, of course, Ceros is built to flex across teams, across goals, and ultimately across the entire Ceros experience. Let me refresh this to see if it will work for me. There we go. Okay, and then lastly, we have it unlocks scalable storytelling. Sorry about this. I think I maybe adjusted the interaction prematurely. All right, so finally, again, it unlocks scalable storytelling. So one of the biggest opportunities that I see with Ceros is the ability to stretch a single piece of content across multiple stages of the funnel, and in a way that still feels fresh and intentional. So for example, take something like a customer story. That one asset can fuel maybe a case study for a top of funnel or a sales enablement tool. And this is where Ceros really shines because each experience that you create can be templatized, modular, and adapted for different teams or moments in the journey. So you're not having to reinvent the wheel every time. You're building a flexible ecosystem of assets that can evolve based on your goals and interaction touchpoints. Okay, moving on to how Ceros powers content at every stage. Okay, so at the awareness stage, obviously we want to capture attention. And this is where first impressions matter the most because your audience is still figuring out who you are and whether you're worth their time. I think Ceros is a really powerful tool here because it allows you to bring to life your brand in a really bold and interactive way. Again, whether it's an interactive quiz, maybe an infographic, or a landing page, you can design something that doesn't just tell the story through text, but you can really show it through design and innovation and makes people really want to engage with your piece. And I'll just click on this for now. So because this is typically like the highest volume stage in your funnel, having standout content here really makes a huge difference for awareness and recall. And the Ceros content types to consider here are landing pages, quizzes, and infographics. These are typically really highly visual, interactive, and again, helps you make a memorable first impression. All right, next we have middle of funnel. And this is often where we see content strategies kind of lose steam a little bit. But this is a really critical stage for us because we know our audience is interested, but they're still shopping around, comparing options. They're gathering information, asking some deeper questions here, and starting to form their preferences. So I believe this is really where Ceros becomes the differentiator because you can create a lot of different things. Content hubs, product explainers, calculators, etc. And this allows users to engage at their own pace. So instead of forcing someone to read through a really long PDF or a really dense page with a lot of text, you're offering something that's really visual, dynamic, and then interactive. To call back to a webinar we did maybe a month or so ago, we did a partnership with Nielsen Norman Group around how people actually read online. And spoiler alert, they actually don't read, they tend to scan. So we really want to make a great first impression for our users, make things really clear, accessible, and immediate so users stay on the page and we don't risk drop off. Okay, moving on to bottom of funnel. So at the decision stage, people are asking, why you? Why now? And this is where we really want content to reinforce the value and make it easy to say yes. So Ceros is perfect for creating persuasive experiences. Some content types to consider ROI calculators, demos, comparison tools, and you can personalize all of these. I know sometimes people think, oh, it's just like a fancy add-on, but it actually helps overcome friction and instill confidence. Okay, and let's not forget about some post-funnel stages here, onboarding and advocacy. So some content types to consider for onboarding: welcome hubs, microsites, galleries. This is guides customers and helps them get up and running really fast. And then advocacy. So content types to consider: case studies, referral tools, events, and webinars. Okay, now that we've gone through all of that, let's see some real life examples. So I pulled a series of examples varying from top of funnel, bottom, middle, and post, just so you can see how these act in real life. And as I'm going through some of these, take a look, think about how you can reimagine these for something that you're doing on your side, on your team. So let's check out our top of funnel experiences first. We have a quiz and we also have a landing page. Let's go ahead and start with the quiz. And Liana, just to confirm, you can still see my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so with this quiz, users are immediately getting to know the brand here. We have their illustrations, colors, some simplistic approach to organizing their content, which is really great. Additionally, this quiz is only 2 questions, which is great for engagement. Sometimes when we see a quiz that has a lot of different questions, you run the risk of drop off or decision fatigue from the user if we're talking about user behavior. So starting off with a really low lift for the user is something to really keep in mind. All right, so as we go through the quiz, we have a few different options to choose from. At the top, you can see that we have a progress bar, which is really helpful for users as they're navigating through pieces. Lets them know where they are. In this case, for this quiz, lets them know how many more questions they have to answer in order to get the results. We move on to the second question. We have some other things to choose from, and then calculating your results. And then we are at our recommendations page. So this is a really nice breakdown of information for the user with some helpful CTAs at the bottom if you're ready to take that next step. So you can download the guide in this case or learn more. All right, let's move on to our landing page. Perfect. Okay, so again, we have some clear messaging right as we arrive to the page to understand the product and understand what kind of information this page is going to be highlighting. We also have a CTA here up at the top if the user is ready to take that next action. Something I always like to point out to clients is providing multiple off-ramps for your users throughout your experience. This is really helpful because everyone intakes information at different speeds and in different ways. So if you give them multiple touch points to take that next action, they're more likely to do so. Okay, scrolling down, we can see that there are a lot of great visual breaks and organized content in a way that is really scannable. So we have some color differentiation here. We have some text that's contained. And again, pointing back to how people actually read online. These things are really important to consider when you're building out a piece, just to make sure that your users can scan appropriately and find the information that's most interesting to them. As we scroll down, we arrive at this tab system that I really enjoy. Tab systems are something that I build almost weekly in Ceros. And tab systems are a great solution for housing a lot of information in one spot. So a user can kind of choose their own journey on what they would like to learn about. And instead of scrolling endlessly to find this information, they're more likely to engage in this manner. Okay. Let's move on to middle of funnel. And we have this calculator here. Okay, so this is a cybersecurity risk calculator. And when we arrive, we get a brief overview of the purpose of the calculator and what it can do for us. And as we scroll down to the calculator itself, we can start putting in our answers. Similar to the quiz we saw, we have a progress bar down here indicating how many more questions the user has to select in order to get their results. Okay, and then we are brought to our personalized results based on our inputs. So you have all of those available to you there. You have an additional CTA that provides additional supporting information with a few different options. So you can learn more, you can start the calculator over, or you can go back to my results. And as you scroll down the page, this isn't too long of a page, which is great. It's typical length for a teaser experience. Again, with the CTA at the bottom, always providing that off ramp for the user. Okay, next we have our microsite for post funnel. And this one I love. I love these illustrations. Again, it's really engaging to me when I first arrive. I want to learn more. I want to engage in the content. There's not too much text at the top, which is overwhelming to me. So I'm ready to jump in. We're also met with this hamburger navigation, which is great because it lists out all the information that I'm going to be getting in this experience. And what I like about this in particular is when you click on any of these, you're anchored down to a specific point. So again, letting the user kind of go at their own pace, choose the sections that they want to get into without having to scroll to get to that point. We have some simple data viz here, some interactions with some quick facts. Again, another tab system that's really nice to house a lot of information in one spot, allowing the user to, again, go at their own pace, choose their own journey. And what I also really appreciate about this is instead of a wall of text, they're using chunking, which is something that you can do to avoid, dense copy. Chunk it into one area, contain it with some visual design elements. So again, that it's easily scannable for the user. And lastly, we have another nice carousel that the user can click throughout. Okay. And then last but not least, we have case study for post funnel. And something to point out, I know over the time I've been showing these examples, you've probably noticed that the headers are pretty engaging. So either a video, illustrations, imagery, etc. This is really important to do to capture the user's attention and make them want to stay and engage with the page. Can't remember if I mentioned it earlier, but we have about 2 to 10 seconds to grab someone's attention before they decide to go find the information elsewhere. So if we can grab them at the beginning with some really inviting, rich media, it will likely encourage them to stay on the page. Okay. So we have some challenges listed here. Why Lacoste chose Algolia. And then as we're scrolling down, you might be thinking, wow, there isn't that much text on this page, and that's totally fine. In some cases, it makes sense. In others, it doesn't. But similar to what I said earlier, we're not just telling the story, we're showing it visually. So we have some poll stats here that could have just been in text, but maybe it would be harder to pick out for a user. We have a short history down here, another poll quote, some additional supporting copy, and then similar to the tab systems that I've seen before, this is another way to house a lot of information in one spot. We call this an accordion. And again, allows the user to go at their own pace, click on the information that is most interesting to them without seeing everything at once. If you can't already tell, I am kind of obsessed with learning about user behavior. So happy to answer any questions on that when we get to the Q&A. Perfect. And I wanted to point out, so we have an off ramp down here, so you can get a personalized demo at the bottom, but you may also notice that we have this sticky navigation up at the top right. So no matter how many times the user scrolls up and down, or no matter what section they're in, this is always available for them to click. So if they have the information they need and they're ready to take that next action, they don't have to go looking for it. They don't have to leave because they can't find it. It is available to them anywhere on the page. All right. So next, let's move into planning your strategy. Okay, so here's a simple framework that I often use when speaking with clients about expanding their use case or growing their strategy. And it's just a few simple questions to do with your team. You can also do this with your Ceros representatives, your CSM, etc. So the first thing is audit. So what content do you already have created, whether it's in Ceros or outside of Ceros? And finding out what stages that content supports, and then where are the gaps. These few questions will really really show you some helpful insights into what you may need to prioritize, and maybe weren't thinking about it before. Next, we have expand. So identifying the next opportunity. Maybe pick one stage, new stage or team to build for. For example, maybe your customer success team needs a new playbook, or your HR team needs a referral hub, or sales needs a new resource. What's one additional use case that you can test with Ceros? And again, we know sometimes that can be overwhelming to do on your own. So your CSMs, your Ceros team is here to help you, along with myself and the strategy team that I'm on. We can have conversations like this. Next, we have repurpose. So take what's working and adapt it. If you already have content that's successful and functionality that you and your audience really likes, how can we repurpose it into a new experience, a different iteration? So, for example, a product explainer could become a landing page, or a case study could become a training module. So, thinking about what you already have, what's already successful, and then tweaking it. And lastly, we have activate. So get it live and start measuring. So launch something, measure it, and then let those results guide the next steps. I always recommend clients check their analytics to see how their specific audience is engaging with their content. How far are they getting down the page? How many pages, if it's a multi-page experience, are they getting through? Which CTAs are they clicking on? Are some being missed? Are some getting, the most action? So this will be really informative to help you create, your next iteration of this experience, or helpful information to then take into a brand new experience where okay, my audience really likes and trusts this functionality. Let's repurpose it over there. Okay, so we made it through the end. I really appreciate you guys sticking with me through all of this, and apologies for that issue that I was having earlier. I know we've covered a lot, how content needs shift across the funnel, how Ceros supports those shifts, and also ways to take action today. So I'd love to open it up to questions if you have any. And let me see if I can check the question box. Okay. Okay, so we have a question here. Should every piece of content in our funnel be interactive? Are there any moments where static content should be used? So something I like to say is we don't want to add interactivity just because we can. It should be purposeful. For example, if we have a piece of text with a button that reveals maybe only one other piece of text, that's a lot more work for the user to do than I think what it's worth. So if you think about interactivity in layers, how much information are you revealing at any given time? We want to make sure that interactivity is purposeful and not just because we can. So that's how I usually think about it. Like, does this make sense for a user to discover on their own, or could I just put it out on the page and it isn't overwhelming to them, and it makes sense where it is? Hopefully that answers your question. Another question here is about user behavior. Should we have our CTAs at the top of the experience so they see it right away? So we see a lot of different things depending on whether or not your experience is embedded or standalone. Standalone experiences allows you to pin anything to the top of the page so that it can follow the user along as they scroll down. That way, at any point in the experience, they have access to that CTA. If you have an embedded piece, you can't use sticky functionality. However, we do see people still create a nav bar at the top, letting the user know what information is going to be in here, and we have a CTA maybe in the corner on the top right. In addition to maybe a couple other CTAs dispersed throughout, again, for those multiple points, multiple touch points of that off ramp, and then again at the bottom. Okay. Another question we have here, do you typically use entrance animations for all text sections on a scrolling landing page? So personally, yes, I think that animations can really bring your experience to life and throughout the time that your user is on the page. So we have an option in the studio when you're applying animations called replay when scrolled onto screen. And no matter how many times the user goes up and down, the animations will trigger. Animations are should be purposeful, but they can really bring some movement to your piece and really engage the user. Okay. So there's another question here. Can you give an example of how you might adapt an experience based on user behavior measurements after it goes live? That's a great question. And that's part of the activate section that I mentioned about planning your strategy. So let's say you have a long scroll experience. Maybe you have a CTA, only a CTA button at the bottom of your page. And if you have an expected number of visitors, in mind or a KPI already established before you publish this, you can compare the click interactions to that stat. So perhaps only, I'm making up some numbers here. Maybe you had 2,000 visitors and maybe only, 200 of them clicked the CTA button at the bottom. This might tell me the page might be too long, maybe not enough people got down to the bottom. Maybe the content wasn't organized in a nice way in terms of scannability. Maybe the information was too dense, too much interaction, which is possible. So really thinking about if I were a user, which we all are, we're all consumers of digital content, we know pretty quickly how we know pretty quickly if we're going to engage with a page or leave because it's too long, it's too dense, etc. So that's an example of how I would kind of think about that user behavior when I make a next iteration or a new experience. Hopefully that's helpful. Let me scan a few more. So the calculator, here's one. The calculator was an interesting capability and one I've run into in the past. How do you set up the first step? Entering a number. So calculators, not all, but most, calculators require the use of our SDK, our software development kit. So there's a little bit of custom HTML when it comes to creating a calculator or maybe some quizzes. So the input field that you see there is a little bit of custom HTML. We've seen other calculators where there are several different inputs that you can apply with some multiple choice questions like that, but there is a little bit of custom HTML for calculators. Okay. Here's another one. Should I still use that replay if scrolled on screen option for my animations if there is a delay to it so it makes sense when the user scrolls down? It might look odd when they scroll back up. Yeah, I definitely know what you're saying. So anything This is how I think of animations. Anything above the fold typically can have more of a delay on it just because they're arriving, everything is loading in, and if you want to cascade some elements, putting a delay on there makes sense. If you're doing a long scroll page, anything below the fold, you don't need to add too much of a delay to it because until it's in view, it's not going to trigger that animation. So as I build a page and go down with animations, the most delay that I put on a piece of text or an asset might be point 0.1 or point 0.2, so it's not it doesn't take too long for it to load for the user. Okay, just sifting through some more. When should I use an interaction with a pop-up or a tab module versus just an animation on text? So it's a great question. I think sometimes it can be challenging to figure out how to really lean into interaction, especially if you're coming from static or maybe it's a new type of experience that you're creating. So, like I mentioned before, interactions should be purposeful. We want to reveal additional information for the user and also give them the option to reveal that themselves. So, animations on text assets, etc., I think should be applied across the board. But for an interaction, we want to make sure that the information that is being revealed um, or information that is being discovered is a decent amount of information that maybe wouldn't sit well on the landing page itself or on the first view itself, so that it's not overwhelming to the user. Maybe it's, a bunch of text that we want to kind of chunk out into an interaction. So similar to that tab system that I was talking about. Okay. Okay. So my team's fairly new to interactive content, and we mainly still create static pieces with an interactive one here and there. How can we start creating more of our content in Ceros without slowing down our process? I think that's a great question. We definitely don't want to be adding more time that none of us have, right? So I think a really great place to start would be to browse our Inspire page. We have a multitude of templates on there for various stages of the funnel, various use cases. See if you like any of those, bring it into your account, and see if you can apply, if you can, sorry, put some of your content in there and see how see how it feels. Additionally, I think maybe I plugged it before, but we have our Ceros asset library within the studio. So this is also a really great way to get started without having to reinvent the wheel or create something from scratch immediately. So we have the ability for you to create assets and add them to your asset library so that they can be rinsed and reused for any experience that you want. We also have a lot of Ceros assets preloaded into the asset library, and all of them are pre-built. So interactions, animations, they're all there for you. And all you have to do is plug in your branding, your imagery, the content itself. So I think that's a really great way of getting started, introducing and acclimating yourself to the studio a little bit more. Okay, let's see what else is in here. What's the lift or time frame look like to turn a landing page into a content hub or a calculator? So I think this varies for a lot of different reasons. I think it maybe depends on how comfortable you feel in the studio, how much content you have from one piece to the other. Something I like to remind everybody is you don't have to, let's say you have this landing page, you have a bunch of different functionality in there. Maybe you have a carousel, maybe you have a block of text in the header, maybe you have a tab system. You don't necessarily need to copy and paste the entire experience into, this new content hub or calculator. You can say, oh, I love this functionality. It's exactly what I need for this content hub. Let me duplicate it and put it into this new one and then build on it. So the time frame really depends on how much content you're translating it into. But starting with pre-built assets that you already have is always a great option. Okay, this one is, can we create a PDF in Ceros as a leave behind? So we do have a PDF export option. So if you are interested in creating a PDF of your Ceros experience, you can export it. Just note that any um, areas where there's interactivity, where things are hidden, that won't show up in the download. Okay. This one here, do you have any tips for creating assessments with a high number of questions as a designer with limited control over the amount of content? What's the best way to keep the user engaged so they're less likely to abandon the assessment? I think that's a great question. So I always like to call out BuzzFeed when I think about an assessment or a quiz. When most people think about BuzzFeed quizzes, it's like, which Disney princess are you? And the user is like, I really want to know what Disney princess I am. And I know I only have to answer a few questions and I'm going to get this really exciting result for me. So making sure that the assessment feels reciprocal, that it's going to be worth their time spending with it. I think if there are a high number of questions, similar to what I mentioned earlier with the calculator and the quiz, adding a progress bar into the assessment will give the user um, some clarity and security, knowing how many more questions they have to answer before they are finished. We have seen a few assessments or surveys or things like that without a progress bar or indication of where they're at in the assessment. And I know for me personally, if I ever have to take, a quiz online, I'm like, how many more questions do I have? So I just want to know where I'm at in the assessment. And that is helpful for users because they're more likely to continue forward with the assessment if they know how many questions they have. Something else to consider is switching up the visuals for each question. So making sure that it's not the same throughout, it can get really monotonous and kind of boring for a user. So if you can change the visuals, change the colors, that can be really exciting for them. And then I see one in the chat. Are the example sites you referenced templatized and available for our use? So all of those examples are live on our Inspire site. Those ones in particular are not available to be used as a template just because those are client experiences that they were willing to share with us and put on Inspire. But if you check our template section on Inspire, you might find some that are very similar. Okay. Do you have templates for calculators or personalized content for bottom funnel content? So I believe, let me think about this for a second. I'm not exactly positive if we do have a template for a calculator, but I know we have um, some really helpful educate articles around how to build a calculator. The visuals really are up to you, but we in the educator articles we share how to include the SDK, custom HTML, etc. If you ever are interested in creating a calculator as well, you can always get with our support team to say, hey, this is what we're trying to achieve. Is this possible? Do you have any recommendations? And then go from there. Okay, let me just slide up in the chat to see if there are any more questions that I missed. Okay. I think that's about it. But thank you all so much for your engagement and your questions. We really appreciate it. And like I mentioned before, if you ever want to have a further conversation around this, get with your CSM, get with your Ceros people, and we can continue the conversation.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for sharing all of your knowledge about creating content for, again, all across your Ceros journey. Again, thank you guys so much for all of your wonderful questions. Elizabeth shared so much insight. You guys will receive a copy of this recording as well as the webinar deck. I know some people wanted to reference back to those examples that Elizabeth showed, so we'll make sure to send all of that in a follow-up email. You can also find all of the information and the resources on our Educate site under this event page, and also check out all of the upcoming webinars and events that we have in store for you guys. So thank you all so much for joining. I hope everyone has a great rest of their Thursdays. Have a good weekend, and we will see you at our next webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.